Hello. Welcome everyone to Story Players. This is a time capsule for people who play and make video games. And we're here just kind of looking at the world of games and seeing what little stories we can pick out from what's going on, what's happened, what looks like is happening. And yeah, this is for you to listen in 20 years and be like, you know what? That was interesting. And I am one of your hosts, as always, Zachary Snader, studio head over at Wildkind, and I am joined by my good friend, Winston Powell.
Hello.
What's up?
Great.
What's up, buddy? How you doing, man?
Just hanging out with a real premium cool dude today.
We're just a couple of premium dudes, man. Just a couple of premium dudes. All right.
I'm keeping track of all your intros, and the narrative is shifting.
Not a single one has been the same, and honestly, I really should just write it down at this point.
Yeah. It's also like a little labored. Like you're doing it like after you just got done reprimanding a child. Like you're kind of like bated breath sort of. And I
feel like the last one that you did was really good. So maybe we just need to go back to that and just write it down verbatim.
I'm totally fried this week, but yeah, I'll try to do it again as well to help out. We have our unique styles.
The people know what we're doing here. All the people who totally definitely listen to this and are giving us great feedback. They know why they're here. They know why we're here. We're all in the know, man. It's okay.
You're right. And that ends our talking about our crappy intro segment, and let's carry on to the topics.
Okay, we have been talking for 40 minutes.
I don't want to say crappy. You do do a good job.
No, that's fine. Mostly. You can judge my intro and tell me that
I say crappy, but I say with love. Because
I'm one of those crappy premium dudes. You got to get the super premiums.
You're a golden diamond.
I can just sort of jump into it if.
Let's hear about your topic. Yeah, I'm curious. You said it was a feel-good topic this time. Usually we're pretty cynical. And if any patrons were listening to the 40 minutes we just got done talking, we were very cynical most of the time.
No one's listening to that.
Let's hear a cozy topic.
Think of how much energy we just burned to record 40 minutes of us just rambling on about Hawken.
Yeah. So if you're interested in that, check out the special bonus episode, I guess.
Dude, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah. All right. Let's hear your feel-good topic.
Yeah. Okay, man. So I am not sure if you saw the trailer for Harmonium the musical.
What?
No? Okay. So Harmonium is a new game from The Odd Gentleman. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They made The Misadventures of P.B. Winterbottom like 11, 12 years ago.
Dude, what a reach.
I know, what a cut, right?
I guess XBLA days.
Dude, it is XBLA days. And I guess
I haven't heard of this.
All the King's Quest games, the modern ones. I don't know.
King's Quest.
And then The Odd Gentleman, out of nowhere, they come out with this game called Harmonium the Musical, which is seemingly from the trailer, a game about a deaf girl who like falls into this symphony that she's writing. And the game, I don't know, it's an interactive musical, kind of like Stray Gods is sort of the vibe I'm getting. Less of a drama, more of, I don't know, like a child's imagining of this musical coming to life. But apparently they brought on a variety of like actual deaf designers to design this game about a girl who is deaf. And sign language like factors in heavily into the game. Like they translate sign. I don't know.
Like mocap sign language? That's cool.
Yes. They like actually signed in the game, and that is how these people communicate, because that's how they would since they are deaf.
That is extremely heartwarming.
Your heart's always moving, but is it always warming? It will after this. It seems
That's beautiful.
really
the
cool.
whole sign language aspect. Yeah,
Dude, totally.
That's unheard of. And I don't.
Okay,
I
so
don't need to make a pun
that's
there,
what
but
I was thinking too, right? And it got me to thinking a bit more about accessibility in games and how, I don't know, dude, like when you've been making games longer than I have, but I imagine even when you first started out, the word accessibility probably wasn't even really a thing, like in the late 2000s, right? I mean, it
Right.
was a thing, but something that was commonplace in the dev community, let alone player communities, like wasn't really there, right? And then
Yeah, I think you'd see like the occasional indie dev making a unique controller for the game that would allow differently abled people to play.
yes,
But that would be like an isolated thing. I think like anything like that would usually just come down to subtitles and maybe different color schemes for
Yep.
the game for color
Sometimes.
blindness. That's probably sometimes. It was super rare back then.
yeah,
But yeah, now we're seeing a lot more of that.
yeah.
Bigger budget games.
There's been this push over the last, I don't know, 5 years. Like one of the coolest things that EA has ever done, man, this might have been like 2018 or so. They started to open up their patents around design features that enabled accessibility in their games.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah,
So
I'm pretty sure it was
let
EA.
other people use the patents. Or other
Effectively, yeah. I'll see if I can fact check myself. Let's see.
What a
EA
very
accessibility.
non-EA move from EA.
I know, right? Yeah, EA is opening all accessibility patents to competitors. Oh, this is 2021. Okay, never mind. So this is very recent. The open patents include Apex Legends ping system. Yeah, cool. And
That
then
was
like
2001. Interesting.
yeah, and then settings with Madden and FIFA that detect and modify colors, brightness, and contrast in a game. Yeah, so that was 2021 they did that, which is just after The Last of Us 2 came out. And The Last of Us 2, for me, like God of War kind of got me thinking like, oh, wow, that's a lot of options in a menu. But when The Last of Us Part 2 came out, I was like, oh, holy shit. Like they really went above and beyond in terms of accessibility. And they released that documentary on the development of the game I don't know, last year. But they had like blind people come in and play test the game as part of their QA process, which is so cool. I mean, it's not quite the same as what Odd Gentleman did and like straight up hire deaf designers to be directly woven.
So they had like consultants.
Right. It was more of like a consultation basis, which is still awesome, right? Still great. But yeah, man, like accessibility being more commonplace is having me as a player of games and now as a developer of games thinking more deliberately about how accessibility is woven into the fabric of a games experience. And I think it's really cool that conversation is happening, not just because more people will get to play, but because we also have to be more creative and intentional about the way that we make our games as well, so that like the broadest types of people can access those experiences too. So I don't know.
For a long time, people were just developing games for people with 2 hands, 2 eyes, and 2 ears.
Normal eyes.
That's kind of how
normal hands.
2 normal eyes.
Yeah.
And that's how you'd interface with a computer. Like that's just how it was. And I think that I almost want to say with the kind of the explosion of games in pop culture in the past decade or so, and the conversation and the exposure that games get with different types of people all throughout the world, I think that's kind of bred this necessity to include more options like this in your game, because more people are being vocal about maybe the situation that they're in when they're having trouble playing a certain game because of a disability or anything like that. And we're hearing about that, and these groups are gathering online. There's petitions, there's more like conversation online about this sort of stuff that's bringing attention to it. Because I think in the earlier days, it wasn't, unfortunately, like differently able people weren't as considered. You see this everywhere. You see this in city infrastructure. Like not every city is made for wheelchairs. And even like cities that claim to be, that's still like, you can't necessarily get everywhere you want to go if you're differently able.
I mean, the ADA
And
didn't
so,
even pass till like the 70s or 80s, I think, the American Disabilities
oh yeah.
Act. Well, so like you just didn't have wheelchair ramps in like most places in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like with people able to be more vocal online and to collect and find like-minded and similar people with similar situations online, that's the beauty of the internet, is just being able to find these people. And also just shout out and talk to developers like, hey, a large part of your community who's playing this games has a disability or would like to experience this part of the game more easily. And they're being heard, fortunately. And a lot of these bigger companies who are able to do these accessibility features in their game, they go for it because it only makes, well, for one, if you're talking about just straight up cold, hard business, it makes you look good. It makes your brand look good, which makes me think like maybe that was part of EA's thing. I mean, but on top of that, you also get a huge community of people who weren't playing your game before able to play, and that's just a good thing. And so I think that's why we're seeing more of it now. Another thing that I think is a big reason why we see more of it is, like, we just named a couple examples of these. We talked about God of War and The Last of Us. Those are probably the largest budget games in the past couple of years, you know? And with all that money comes the ability to add features in like this. Because if you ask me to add accessibility features to my game, I can't, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's just, I can just about add subtitles to my game. But if we're talking about all the different things, all the different features, you know, accommodating for all these different things, I simply can't make the game and do that, unfortunately, just because of the way I'm structuring the game.
Yes. Okay.
And because I'm making a game that's in a genre that people are familiar with and I'm familiar with. So I can design it the way it's always been designed and people can play it like it's always been played. If I had gone into it with a different perspective, if I had gone into it being like, I'm definitely going to make sure that it has all these features, I would be kind of treading new ground for myself and going out of my way to do these things and accommodate for that stuff. But I did what was most familiar for me and was easier for me as just a solo developer. And I did that route. And that's me excusing myself. Obviously, I should add features that people ask for. But the AAA people, they have the ability to add, because the features are crazy features. Like if you look at the different features, there are an insane amount and an insane like depth of features that they have for post-processing, for physically changing the way the game looks and sounds and behaves, so that even people with near blindness can play through The Last of Us, and even people who are deaf can play through The Last of Us, and so on, and you know. And that's just something that comes with, I mean, correct me if you have a different opinion. I imagine that comes with a huge budget. That comes with a big price tag. It takes a lot to do that, like a lot of resources to do all that stuff. So this
was kind of the second half of my wonderings here. I was like, how can developers who are resource constrained, like you and I, think about accessibility as it pertains to the development of a game? Like, how do you inherently bake in accessibility when you're going through the design process, when you are making those considerations of like, first and foremost, I want to make a great game, right? When you immediately think that, typically right now, or here, I'll just put myself in this, like, accessibility is not, it's just not my highest priority, you know? And that's not to say it's not important to me, but the actual framework of the game, like how it's running, making it performant, making sure that the art direction aligns with the vision of the game, and like making sure all the systems and the features are in there, like those are all the things that take precedent. And it's already basically impossible to do all of that, right? Like the fight to actually make a game is already so hard especially when you don't have that much money or time or whatever it might be. So adding in this layer of an additional consideration that you have to make when going through this design process is an extremely challenging one. And yet, the more that I think about it, and I would, for context, like I am someone who would, I guess, consider myself like generally an abled person. Like I have full control over my limbs. I have full faculty of my mind, and like the connection between all of my motor skills and my brain, like works as, intended, for lack of a better word. So these are also things that I'm not like thinking about, or that I'm not reminded of on a daily basis. Like I do kind of take my bodily functions for granted, right? I say all of that to color the design process, and that I'm not prioritizing accessibility as a consideration because of all these other things that have so much weight to me. However, it's like, to your point, like, should I be thinking about that differently? And if I am, how can I, as a creator, make sure that I'm accommodating for that in the process, in a realistic way? And that's really what got me thinking about all this. Is like, how can we as game creators be more deliberate and inclusive towards accessibility without it being such an impossible thing that it's like, yeah, we feel good about talking about it, but then no one can actually do it. And that, because that would be like super disingenuous, right? And no one would be benefited as a result of that.
Here's what I kind of think about that. Because you say we're both able-bodied. We don't have disabilities, fortunately, very fortunate. But as humans, we are disabled. We are still human, and games are a medium that have been kind of produced to accommodate for the human condition, for like how we interact. Like we need two hands to be able to interact with a computer. We need our eyes. So a game is naturally a visual medium, and you interact with it with some kind of controller. And so like, if you think about it that way, we are disabled, and the game is accommodating for us to interact with this virtual space. And that is simply because of the how do I put this? Like the nature of a game. I'm sort of losing myself here, but hold on. The nature of the game
listening.
Was intended for interaction with a certain like type of person, like people with these abilities, right? And that's just how we've come to know games. We understand that games are these things that we have to interact with our eyes, our ears, and our hands, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the way games are built. Like they're accommodating for our inability to interact with it with our minds, for now anyway. Okay. So like we're dealing with a medium that is already accommodating for a type of ability that humans have. It just happens to be popular. It's just big. So where I was going with all that whole train of thought was that I think, going back to this Harmonium the musical, this game is being built from the start with a feature in its very bones to accommodate for deaf people. And it is no cost to that game production at all. It's literally just part of the game now. Like instead of doing regular talking animations, they're talking with their hands. Like most games have some way of moving the mouth while you're speaking. This game instead opts for moving the hands while you're speaking. And all that stuff is built in from the very start. I guess that was like a really long-winded way of saying we haven't reached a point where the game development begins with accommodations for differently abled people as much as it does for like the commonly abled person.
Yeah.
Right? So like, I think in the future we'll see engines like Unreal specifically coming built in with packages automatically enabling a game to have, like, instead of lip sync, why not hand sync? And why not these like image filters and stuff like that already inputted into the engine, right?
Yeah, interesting.
And so I think with that's what we see for our future. And we're in the weird, awkward position where we're making conventional style games for conventional styled people. And we're using conventional style tools. But I think in the future we'll see a much larger change in that way. I guess what I was trying to explain before was kind of high concept, but what I meant to say essentially was like we've just been making games targeted towards a certain abled type of person. And we can just as well develop a game for differently abled type of people, as long as the tools and the starting point and the design starts from a place of consideration. And I want to put on top of that as well, if I haven't already lost everyone, consulting is such a big part. Like, because I think differently abled people because there's such a variety of them, it ends up being harder to find these types of people. Like, I can't really tell you if I know anyone personally that is blind, just maybe colorblind. I don't know anyone who's missing limbs. I don't know anyone who has, different types of disabilities, to my knowledge, and so I couldn't just, as an indie developer, I couldn't just turn to someone I know and just be like, hey, can you consult on this game for me to make sure I'm making it right? I'm essentially just making a game for me, right? That I can play. And so like that, I think that's another element to it. It's like starting from a place that considers all these types of people. And then also I really encourage consultation when it comes to this sort of stuff, because we can do our own research. It comes with a lot of research, I think, as well. That's another big part of it. If we just talk about color blindness, you have to look at the different types of color blindness and stuff. So it requires a lot of research, but then you want like actual people there to tell you and give you feedback. And that's another thing it's a resource intensive thing. You want to pay those people, or, you want to spend that time with them and make those changes and stuff. So I think those are the two elements. I think we're all moving in a good direction when we're talking about like pre-made tools and stuff, accommodating for these things. But yeah, I hope I made sense.
Yeah. No, you did.
It might have been a little long-winded.
I think the conversation is an important first step. And, less important than actually doing it. But like, we have to have awareness around these things before they can be top of mind for people to care enough to actually invest the resources. And you mentioned that the Odd Gentlemen aren't like investing in this necessarily because it's inherent to their process, but they kind of are, because they are making a deliberate choice to build the game in this way. So the investment they're making, it's a trade-off between, hey, we're going to do this in this very specific way, as opposed to, hey, we're just going to make the game as we normally might have. And that's the thing, right? Is like, you could put the same amount of money into both of those methodologies of creation. Mm-hmm. They just happen to be making their investment choices around developing the thing in this way. Right.
Yeah, they're innovating on it. They're making
100%.
Like an active decision to go against like what they're facilitated to do with a usual game.
Dude, the game itself is not just the innovation. It's the way in which they are creating the game as well is innovative. Right. And like, go ahead.
I was gonna say like this whole like sign language thing. I think it was Cyberpunk. I know there's been technology for this before, but there's been like lip syncing technology kind of iterated on for the Elder Scrolls series, for Cyberpunk, where you just get dialogue from a recording, and it can the system interprets that into mouth movements, and it can do that automatically.
Right. So like,
and
different
that was
languages
the system that was
like
innovated on. Because most people communicate with their mouth and with speech, and that was a technology that was created because most people communicate that way. Yeah. When I'm sure that when this game comes out, people are going to take that technology and continue to iterate on it. And I don't see it as too far out to imagine a plugin for Unreal or an engine to take dialogue and turn it into hand movements instead.
Like an
and
ASL
also
rigger
translate it,
or something.
Yeah. And also translate it to the different sign languages for the different world sign languages. And that's something that, it's so slow in developing, I think, because it's not in super high demand until recently, so now it's a new thing where we're kind of breaking new ground, or they are anyway, in this technology. And I can totally see that becoming more of a commonplace thing in the future, is like, oh, I can switch on sign language instead of dialogue, click a button. And because once you have all the words in there already, the AI can look at it and just turn it into sign language. It's a language, just like subtitles are a language. I mean, I think that's something that's on the horizon.
Yeah.
And it's just coming with more time, because it's just that innovation, for these kind of things, it's a slower process because it's not as in high demand, especially when you're talking about games or movies. Like it's generally assumed that you know how to see and you can hear.
Right.
You know how to see. You can see and you can hear to watch a movie. Just generally assume that that's the situation. But then once you start considering other groups of people, that's when you can look at innovation.
Man, now you've got me thinking it prescriptively about like how something like Harmonium's technology could translate into other games. Like I was thinking
directly. I think it could be directly. Like the next Witcher game might have sign language in it, you know? Like he's already moving his hands while he talks, so.
But dude, even for a game like mine, like I'm making a rugby rhythm action game, right? Like we're not really thinking about narrative or anything. But even in the menus, I've had this idea for a dating sim floating around. And like that's mostly text based, right? But what if you could also, instead of it being
a rugby
diegetic,
dating sim.
Yeah.
Yeah, you told me about this.
But instead of the game having to show those things like in game, like diegetically, hey, here is what the sign looks like as the character would do it. Because like if we don't have the talent or the understanding of how to do that in an effective way with a rigged character, for example, and let's say we don't have that tech leveraged, is there a way that we can have like a text to ASL or whatever sign language converter that actually shows what the sign is as a subtitle almost, right? So the subtitles, instead of being text, it's actually showing the sign. Like maybe that's a bridge as an interim.
I think we can see. I actually think I've seen examples of this where like it takes the words and in the corner there's like a little cartoon person or cartoon hands, not cartoon, but like an illustration. Mm-hmm. As it's speaking, it signs out in the corner, like for people who need the sign language. I think I've seen that before. If not in games, then probably on TV and movies. I know in Brazil specifically, there's a huge effort to accommodate for people who have a hard time seeing and hard time hearing. Basically, every package, especially pharmaceuticals, will have Braille on them. And most every broadcast will have sign language in the corner, like especially if it's the news or something.
Interesting.
And unfortunately, like if I'm being cynical about it, it's because that's important for elderly voters. Like they want them to hear the politics that are on TV.
Okay.
They want them to understand what's being spoken. So cynically, like I think that was a political move, but I also think it's just a nice like I don't remember seeing that in the United States. You watch TV and you just see a guy speaking to the camera. But here, if you're watching the news, there's always a signer, someone signing down at the bottom, Brazilian Sign Language.
Dude, I didn't hear about ASL interpreters for musicians until I think it was like Eminem. His
Really?
ASL interpreter was like going hard.
Wow.
During the song, she was like rapping out the lyrics through ASL.
Those are some fast hands.
Yes.
Those got to be some fast hands.
Dude, she was going so hard, and like the video of her doing that went viral. And I think more musicians as a result have had ASL interpretation in their acts, or maybe they have other sign language interpretation, depending on the country they're playing in. But yeah, like, I don't know,
That's cool.
maybe your cynicism has bred a solution for people as well, to maybe flip it into a positive.
I'm sure it comes from a good place. I'm sure the signers are all very proud of what they're doing because they're helping people, understand and communicate. And it is for the good. I say it's a cynical take because I think it was funded from like the necessity for politicians to get the elderly vote.
Right.
I think in Brazil specifically, because a lot of like elderly people, there's a huge population and those are the biggest voters, I think, in most countries.
Well, we've plenty of elderly folks out here in America, and we're not doing it here. So
it's all like I said, it all comes with resources. Like this sort of thing doesn't come cheap. Finding a new way to communicate with a new group of people, like you really do need to put money down and put effort down and time and all that stuff. So
I think it's cool that this conversation is becoming more commonplace, and I want to challenge myself to think on this more. Because there is someone on my team that's differently abled, and like I've got some mental stuff. It's not physical, and like dude, as you were talking about the people with blindness and like missing limbs, like I have a friend who is missing part of an arm, and he used to play rugby, and I haven't even, like, this is on me, I haven't even thought about talking with him specifically about the development of our game, right? Like, he's a great friend. He's like an uncle to our son, and I haven't even thought about it. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, wow, right? Like, that sucks. Like, I should be thinking about that. But again, it's come down to like that hasn't been a priority for me. So how do I make sure that it is? And I
Right. 'Cause
appreciate.
we're
Go
both
ahead.
on the track of making more conventional style games. Like even if the concepts are innovative in
Right.
the games themselves, like the way you play it, we're using conventional engines, we're using conventional
Yes,
design means.
for people with two
So-
eyes that we think are normal, and two ears that we think are normal, and two hands that we think
Right.
are normal. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and just the diversity in the types of disabilities, and that's kind of another daunting task. Is like there's such a variety of human conditions.
Yep.
Like even between two people, like that you just grab at random, there's so much difference between those two people. And then if we're talking about everyone in the world, like there's such a huge spectrum of ability.
Yep.
And that in itself kind of, I think, can discourage people making conventional style games. But if you do take that as a whole and you go in on it, and like you said, like the Naughty Dog and who makes God of War,
Sony Santa Monica.
like those option menus are huge,
Mm-hmm.
and they probably don't even touch on most of the cases. Like those are all kind
Right.
of visual audio things.
Yeah.
And we're talking about like people, someone could have cerebral palsy, someone could have like, missing limbs like your friend, all this types of stuff. And like, it does make me really proud to like remember the like customizability of that Xbox controller that they were working on, that Microsoft was kind of working on. They were working with all types of people to get this working right so that anyone could customize the controller to be any shape they needed it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another one of those things that's part of it too. It's like the actual controller device that needs to be innovated on, because the format is a symmetrical thumb thing
Yeah.
that we thumb, and that doesn't work out for everyone. So thankfully there's a lot of innovation happening in that field now. And I think this Harmonium game is a great example of that. I'm super excited to see where that goes. Like, what if the next Witcher game does have a switch to turn on hand sign language? That'd be cool.
Yep.
That'd be awesome. Geralt, he's doing all his spells and stuff with his hands, and he can also talk.
There you go.
Those are some magical hands.
Magical hands. Well, yeah, man. That's what I've got for today's.
Awesome. That was a
Story
great
Players,
topic.
So
I loved that.
yeah. So how about what you got? What you got going on? What you got for us, buddy?
Oh shoot. Here I am all like unprepared.
No, we have time. I tried to assure we had time for both of us, so we're good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually something, I guess, was it last time we talked about this? I was talking about like demos and stuff for like the PlayStation 3 tech demo type stuff.
We talked about this at some point.
Was
I
that
don't
last
remember
time?
when. I'm not sure.
one of the past episodes we talked about that. I guess I
might-
left the conversation still feeling a little like, because it is what it is. You don't see that stuff anymore. You don't really see that type of stuff anymore. We do see innovations in certain ways and stuff, but it's not really scratching that itch for me as personal as it is. Because you said it's not really something that you're missing or anything. But for me personally, I miss this, like, just to reiterate, it's just like that tech demo, fluid simulation, math on display, doing cool things in games that we used to see in like the PS3 era with like all kinds of cool simulations, physics, like cloth simulation, all that stuff that was really on the forefront of game designs. Anyway, so I felt kind of bad after that conversation because, yeah, I don't get that feeling anymore.
Oh, right, because we
However-
were talking about graphical fidelity versus gameplay innovation and how
Yeah,
we've-
'cause
we've
there's
only
still
been driving-
innovation.
Yeah.
We've still been driving innovation, but I think it's been more visual and not like fun. Like fluid sim is like a really cool one. Ragdoll physics, like, stuff like that. Like I remember Euphoria, that ragdoll physics engine was really cool to learn about before they put it in that Star Wars game and in Grand Theft Auto 4. So yeah, you don't see like playful things like that anymore until just the other day. I want to talk about this game that I saw. It was actually shown off at one of the PS5 things. It's called Astro.
Yeah.
And have you seen it?
Yeah.
Astrobot.
Did you look at Astrobot's Playroom at all when that came out?
Yeah, Astro's Playroom
Or
was
Astro's
a pack-in
Playroom.
for the
Yeah, yeah.
PS5,
Right.
and it was like showcasing what is it called? The haptic feedback in the
Yes.
PS5 controller, the like HD stuff. Well, Digital Foundry just did a video on the full standalone game Astrobot, and I was just completely delighted to see all the cool simulation tech demo type stuff on display in this game, because it has everything in it. Not only is it like a really polished, like kind of stylized platformer, very pretty and sharp looking, it also has a lot of fluid in it, a lot of like rippling effects, physical grass as you walk through it, physical objects pushing themselves off to the side as you're walking through it. All these cool like tech demo-esque features and details that you don't really see in a usual game. Like there's mud that you can walk through and you actually make a little trail through the mud. Anything that falls in the mud makes a little imprint and footprints and all that kind of stuff. You can break through glass and ice and stuff in this game. It's all very physical and tactile. And it's just totally reminiscent of that era where you were seeing these like tech demos and wondering like, man, what future of games is going to look like. And I think we're finally there, seeing Astrobot like actually kind of vindicating those ideas and adding this kind of like physically simulated interactions, kind of like that tech demo feel into the game. And yeah, if you watch footage of it, I know this is an audio format, but look it up and you'll see like even the Digital Foundry like little preview they did. It was just kind of like a podcast style thing, but they show off gameplay footage of this game, and it's got fluid simulation. It's got like hundreds of physics objects, breakable glass, sand that you can like displace, and mud that you displace while you're walking through it. It's got all these really cool features that you simply do not see in a conventional game because it's not the focus. But it's one of those things that really makes the game so much more fun and like physical feeling, like tactile. And it works perfectly for a platformer style game. This is like a Mario style kind of game. And so to make your game feel really, really tactile is super important. But we have the most realistic looking games that ever have been. But you can't break the glass. You can't like leave footprints in the ground. You can't like shoot water around the map and have like puddles of water moving around. Like, sure, they're realistic looking, but they're so static feeling. But this game really feels physical. Every like blade of grass you walk by, you push it around. There's one part of the footage he showed where he's like, there's like a little container of water that you can swim through, and there's leaves floating on the surface of the water. And as you go through the water, you actually separate the leaves and leave a trail of water behind you where the leaves separated. It's like all these little tactile things that you just don't see in games, man. I miss it, but it was like such a delight to finally see that happen there. I just wanted to bring that up. If you haven't seen it, like I definitely recommend you looking it up, because it's totally what I was talking about in a full game, just totally looking awesome. And it also kind of reminds me of Little Big Planet, because Little Big Planet, I think, had little notes of that in there as well.
Yeah.
They even had like kind of water sim sort of in that game, and cool physics and like all kinds of materials and stuff.
I mean, it's kind of hard for me to expand on it too much because I've only seen Astrobot from a distance because I don't have a PlayStation 5. So I haven't.
Yeah.
I've never even held a PlayStation 5 controller. So I don't.
Yeah, I don't even know what the haptic feedback feels
Dude,
like.
I've just heard about it, you know?
Apparently
like
it's
I've
cool.
heard it feels great. Astrobot looks awesome. To me, I don't know, man. I kind of feel similarly to what, I guess we did discuss it the other week. Astrobot might be pushing forth the simulation of water physics on the PlayStation 5, but I don't know what they're really doing with that, right? Like, is that any different than deformation of snow when Kratos is running through a snow level? You know,
I guess when you see it in like a AAA game, maybe there's like it becomes an inherent detail of being realistic. You expect those things. But with Astrobots, like the way the levels are designed, they kind of have this like, what do you call it? Like an aquarium kind of look. Like everything's kind of little and you're running around as this little thing. And so those types of detail, it's kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids sort of thing, where like you get more grounded, literally grounded with like the elements that you're experiencing. So like Kratos, he can walk through like a marsh or whatever, and sure, there's like a little ripple and whatever behind him, like a swamp or something. But we're like fine with that level of detail. But when you're like on the ground level and you're little, you expect to sink into the mud and have like big, like these little ripples actually become big waves. And so I think it's important for that type of visual style that they're going for to have these larger than life physical details playing out. And I'm sure they use it all for the puzzles and stuff. Like I know they have like a fire hydrant or something, or like a paint gun, and they're shooting actual like particle water simulation into the scene.
Okay, so
like that would be something. That'd be something kind of faked in another game. You just maybe get like a particle stream, and then the splashes would just be a particle. But this is like physical based fluid sim in this little game.
I mean, I guess the apex that you can reach with simulation is having it be so realistic that the simulation is indistinguishable from how it would behave in the real world, right?
Yeah, and I think that this is an example of like it being kind of hyper realistic, because it doesn't look real. It just looks delicious. It just looks like you want to dive in there, and like the water looks kind of jello-y, and like it's kind of just like a hyper realism, like a stylized realism. So the water, it behaves in its own way. It kind of has this particular look to it because the way they're simulating things. But I mean, is it different than Kratos walking through snow?
I mean, that's the thing, dude. Like, is it though, right? Because you're talking about how it feels like a tech demo. Maybe that's just because it's not trying to be like actually realistic. Because it appears pseudo-realistic, they're able to get away with it appearing more, I don't know, marvelous, perhaps, or bombastic.
There's like an exaggerated nature to it.
Yeah.
I've never played the new God of War games.
I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2,
I imagine there's
like anything where you can see deformation of the world that appears to be trying to be realistic, right? Where you can suspend your disbelief of this thing being fake, and you're like, oh, holy shit, those leaves just fell off of that tree and landed in the mud. And when I walk over to look at these leaves, I leave footprints that have depth to them, like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Maybe I'm just too far removed from like the latest games, because I haven't played Red Dead, I haven't played God of War, haven't had a PS5. My computer can just barely run Resident Evil 4 Remake and Elden Ring. And Elden Ring, doesn't have that type of thing at all in it. Nothing's like physically simulated except for like the ragdolls or something, and the wind maybe. Maybe I'm just used to playing a different type of game that's not really going for that.
I don't know. I think even look at the Forever Winter trailer. Like they have the robot smashing the dude and blood comes out. Like that's what you might expect to happen if a person were crushed by a giant machine, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a surprise though. I'm thinking about things that kind of like take you off guard. Like the way it's framed in Red Dead is like you kind of expect these things to look and do what they do, but there's nothing like hyperbolic about it. Like it's not like you can run into a tree with the horse and have the tree actually bend over or break or anything. Like maybe the little saplings fall over or whatever.
I mean, I think the tree would win that battle against the horse though.
Maybe.
Yeah, if the horse's skull were crushed, now we're talking. Now that's a tech demo. Tree crusher.
I know it just wigs out into like a ragdoll-y kind of like springy mess when you crash the horse or whatever. But I don't know.
We need to have more realistic your average horse game collision is what you're saying.
I don't think Red Dead is your average game. I think they do a lot of this stuff. Like they have these tech demo elements in them. But like your average everyday game that comes out, it's worried about like just looking good and the gameplay mechanics.
Yeah.
Whereas very few games go and they want interactability to be like a main part. Like not canned interactability, like where you go up to an NPC and you punch him and he falls over, but like this physical kind of living interactability where there's like, I don't know, like little NPCs that follow you around, like little chickens or whatever that like follow you around, and they bounce around and they can fall off the ledge or whatever if you lead them astray, and like they leave their own trail of whatever behind them, and like it's kind of like more. It's definitely hard to put into words. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that I got something out of seeing Astrobot that I honestly don't think we see in games. Like, sure, the big budget games they have energy to put that stuff in there, but it's such a focus in Astrobot that like it was cool to see.
Yeah.
Them really put focus on like these details. These living, breathing, interactable details, making the world really feel like you could touch anything and it will react. Whereas like you play Cyberpunk and nothing reacts to you.
Yeah, I think I get where you're coming from, right? Like the notion of Astrobot is to present itself in a way where it is coming across as trying to be a presentation, as a showcase. Like that's part of the whole.
It's an interactive presentation.
Yes, but that's part of the charm of, because Astro's Playroom, I guess, was like a love letter to the Sony console generations. And you could be like inside of a PlayStation, and there were like some puzzles around that, something to that effect. Again, I've only seen it and not played it, right? But it seems like it is meant to come across as that kind of showpiece, because that's sort of the inherent charm of the experience that you get from playing that game. Whereas, to your point, like, yeah, maybe these other games that are trying to replicate like the highest level of simulation and fidelity are trying to meet the expectations of players expecting something that might be a lived-in world where it's like, this is the reality of the world. So I suppose the perspective of how each of those methodologies approaches fidelity are different, but I still think they're parallel tracks in a way, right? Yeah. Because I don't think you get one without the other. They might just be different interpretations of similar ideas.
Maybe there's just something I can't describe about it, but I think if you watched Astrobot, some footage of it, it's clear to see.
I watched the trailer. Like it looks really cool, and I can see the very clear distinction between that and some other game that might have similar resources and go in a completely different direction, a la God of War or Last of Us or whatever it might be from Sony, or even Concord, right? Like Concord.
I don't think Concord's going to have any of this stuff.
Of course, right?
Concord is going to be static and just a multiplayer, like, esport shooter thing.
But it'll look beautiful, but beautiful in the sense of like iterating upon the kind of fidelity that those other big Sony single player AAA games are going for, right? As opposed to,
I guess it's
what you're talking about with Astrobot.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of like most games, they try for realism, or they try to keep things looking like kind of, grounded in their world. Yeah. Whereas Astrobot isn't afraid of showing these crazy amounts of physical parts, like screws and bolts and stuff flying through the air. It's not afraid to like splash water particles, like actual physical water particles or glass or anything like that on the screen. It's kind of like, it's totally hyperbolic realism. Whereas like most games, they kind of hide it to the point where it's like, I don't know, there's just never that much really going on. Like, sure, you can drop something in the snow in Red Dead and it leaves a mark, but it's not like if Astro Boy had snow where, like, I don't know, it might even form balls and stuff. There might be this extra level of interactability. And I think that's part of the game design, because it is like, it's meant to be like a fun interactive physics platformer type of thing. And so that's what just makes it more refreshing for me. It's like, it's really going out there and just having these technologies really on the forefront of things.
Yeah. I am watching the
usually
trailer
it's blending
again.
into the background.
I'm watching the trailer
it's because
it's worth.
I mean, I've seen the trailer and sure, but like the Digital Foundry video they just put up is like, he shows some footage and points out some interesting things that I really connected with. Like, yeah, I mean, if glass breaks in even like the highest fidelity game, it's not going to break where you hit it. It's just going to shatter the whole thing usually. But like in Astro Boy, it breaks where you hit it, and it has like a shattering effect, and it does all that stuff. And that's like, it's going so far with all these details, whereas like a usual game will just kind of do shortcuts, I think. Like, sure, it'll have the basic glass breaking, but it won't go in there and like show you where your bullet actually hit and break just that part of the glass or anything like that. Because there's so many shortcuts to those effects. You just don't see it as much anymore. There's so many like ways around to make it not as processor heavy. Like I remember, did you have a PS3 when you were growing up?
Yes.
Did you have Resistance: Fall of Man?
I played through the entirety of Resistance. I rented Resistance from the UAT library.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, okay. So this is probably something you didn't notice because you're not me.
Okay.
But the glass in this game, in the first Resistance game, if you shoot the glass, any window in the game, like if you're in one of those little like European towns or something, you shoot the glass in that game, it doesn't just shatter and break and leave a hole in the window. A panel of glass like will fracture off in the most realistic way. It won't shatter anything. It'll just like break a piece of the glass off. It'll leave a nice little bullet hole. It'll create that spider web thing or whatever. And if physically, like dynamically, a piece of glass will fall out of the window. Like pieces of glass will fall out of the window. It's the most realistic glass breaking technology in any game I've ever seen. It doesn't look fake. It leaves a realistic hole. The glass looks like there's thickness to it. It is so damn realistic. There's no reason for it, but it's there. You shoot your gun at the thing and it looks so realistic. And that's what I'm talking about is like, there's no reason for that anymore. Like people don't need those little details anymore. But Astrobot goes ahead and says, yeah, I want that to the glass as well. Is going to be like very physically simulated. It's going to break realistically. I honestly think Resistance: Fall of Man glass still looks better than Astro Boy or Astrobot somehow. But that's one of those things. That's an example of those things. It's just like, it's so insane that this was simulated in such a great way. It looks so real. It's so interactive, and it's never been done before because there's no reason to do it. But it's something I love so much because it was just such a great trick they had there. And I think Astro Boy is the closest they're going to get there to that again.
Astrobot.
Because it's so much more easy.
You really want it to be Astro Boy.
I really wanted to be Astro Boy. No, Astrobot. Yeah, whatever. It's one letter off. Yeah, I think most games, if there's glass breaking in at all, it's gonna shatter the whole thing at once, and it's gonna be a particle effect, and that's it. Even in like the most modern games, maybe like the Division has something. I remember the Division having a lot of interesting tech on display there, the original one, but it's just you don't see that, and I miss it. And I think Astro Boy is filling that niche for me. Maybe there's someone out there who can relate to this for me because you're not relating at all.
But
maybe there's someone who can relate.
I'm not sure.
I love that technology stuff. I like learning about this stuff and seeing it in a game.
I do too, man. I think it's cool. I'm not sure that what Astrobot's doing is a bridge further than rope physics in The Last of Us Part 2, you know?
Oh, that was a cute one too. I like that too. That's another good example is the rope physics. Like that's something you don't see anywhere else. I think that's a good example, honestly. Sure, like Last of Us has a lot going on there. The rope physics is a good example.
The rope and glass were notable
different
in that game for sure.
But it's because like no other game does that. That's why it stands out is because there's no other games that really do that.
Okay.
Aren't just focused on rope.
In that context, I mean, I guess that is what you're saying, but I suppose I can agree with where you're coming from there. And I don't know, like to what end, right? Like, are you saying that more?
So jaded
I mean, are you saying that more games should like behave in the way that Astrobot appears that it will?
No. I don't want games to do anything they don't want to do. I'm just saying I really appreciate it when there's something like that stands out, that's so different, that's so physics oriented, or like it goes beyond what games are.
Okay.
Games are these like static things you run around in and kill things in. But the rope in The Last of Us or the glass in Resistance, like those are just so detailed in their own little microcosm that it stands out. And then it's also something you just never see again or ever. Like you just don't see it. Now, here's another example. This might not help at all, but this is another example that came to mind. Speaking of PS3, is in the first Killzone 2. There's a whole lot going on in Killzone 2. That's why I really love the Killzone series. But Killzone 2, there's so much.
I'm so fascinated by the depth of your character. Every time you bring up a new franchise, I would not expect you to play. Like,
Killzone is great.
I love Killzone.
I played all of them.
I'm so
except
happy.
For 4.
Okay.
Here's Killzone. Killzone is like Digital Foundry did a video on Killzone 2 as well. Like it is a showstopper. It's such a
Killzone
cool
2 is
like tech piece.
I remember when that came out. I was just like, holy shit! I can't believe games can look like this.
Yeah, and it's still like for my money, still looks great. And I think there's a lot of concessions for 3 that were made that make it look a little less good, but stylistically better.
Yeah.
So there's like a weird thing there. But they wanted to make it 2-player split screen, so they had to do some whatever. But yeah, Killzone 2, it's full of these things. It has stuff like when you shoot a trash can, or when you shoot a trash bag on the road, it explodes and bugs crawl out of it. It has like physics-based objects for when wind picks up. You can see like wires blowing in the wind and trash blowing across. It has this like crazy physics system for the enemies where when you shoot any part of their body, it physically pushes back that part of the body and they stagger and they maybe drop their gun a little bit or like let go of their gun. Physics like all over the place in the game. And there's like, there's all these light sources in the game. It's just, it really is an incredible like tech demo showpiece. That's why I love that game so much. But the little detail that I noticed that you just don't see was when you kill a Helghast soldier, or I guess when anything dies and falls over in the game, blood will seep out from underneath it, right? And across the ground. Mm-hmm. And it's so realistic looking. This blood creeping across the ground. It's dynamic in that it actually follows like the normal maps on the ground. So it like actually filters through the cracks. And like it just comes out in this really natural way. It spills out in this really like beautiful way. It's so good looking. And then when it stops, it actually slowly congeals. So you actually see it turn like dark red and the edges kind of dry up and it turns kind of orangey. It's so detailed. There's no reason for it. And you never see that again in game because that problem is so easily solved with just having texture projection just expanding below the character, right? Like that's problem solved. But they went and they added this little detail. It just drives me crazy. You just never see this again. And I would just be obsessed over this like blood congealing in the streets.
Now you got me
like,
wondering
it's just,
if Astrobot were a violent shooter, how great it would look just to have, I don't know, small robot creatures bleeding on the ground. Like that would be gorgeous. Yeah,
I mean, I think for horror games, having physical bodies and dynamic blood and fleshy simulations is great. Like I think Gears of War had a level of flesh simulation and stuff for its like what do you call this stuff when a body explodes? What is that stuff called?
Giblets?
The gibs?
Giblets?
Yeah, the gibs. I think it's just called the gibs or the gibs.
The gibs. Yeah.
But
were they I don't know if they were simulating that so much as like appending physics to a collision.
I think that version of Unreal had like you could take a mesh, add a physics collider to it and it would give it a property of this deformation. And I think they would use it for when you blew up like a big giant boss or something and the pieces fell down. Yeah, but they would have physics.
Maybe, but I remember very distinctly, like you could go up and shotgun a dude.
Oh,
and it felt like that maybe wasn't simulated so much as it's just like, okay, dude was blown up with shotgun, make everything explode in various directions.
I think there was an amount of damage you could do where they would just explode. But I do remember there being corpses that you could just shoot and they would be physically simulated. And then pieces would pop off. But, you know, like, I don't know. That's just like, I guess it's things that you see in some games that just never appear again because there's no reason that I just love, that I appreciate. So like Killzone 2 stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of that in Astro's Playroom or Astro Boy. Astrobot.
Astro Man and his son, Astro Boy.
Yeah. I mean, Astro Boy's a real thing.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, I wanted to bring it up again. Sorry it didn't hit again. It didn't
No. I don't think it's that. I think it's... I get where you're coming from. I think it's made me think a little bit more about like what are... Not even necessarily gameplay innovations, but I guess just like the individual technical innovations that kind of stack up to allow something like Astrobot to exist. And I think from where you're coming from, if I were to extrapolate that out, it's like, what kind of interpretation of these things is Astrobot doing that will push other developers to think about things in a similar way and move even further in that direction? I think that could be really cool. I'm not sure that the way in which they are presenting those things, and maybe it was just a semantic thing for me, but to me, I look at Astrobot and I'm like, wow, that looks freaking awesome, right? I'm not as like detail oriented when it comes to these things, and I don't know, that's a me problem for sure. But just taking in the whole package, I look at it and I'm like, this is a really freaking nice looking game, and maybe that does more to further nice looking games in the future, you know?
I think a lot of the charm for me as well is just like knowing that there was someone on the team who wanted to go that extra mile and do something extra like charming with their task. Like the blood, someone made that blood and they were just like, you know what, I can do this. I have an idea. I'm going to put this idea into practice. Or the glass from Resistance. I'll send you a video of the glass because I'm sure I can find it somewhere.
Okay.
And it is the best looking glass breaking in any game there is, till this date, to date.
Yeah.
I'm charmed by the like creativity and the kind of just the creativity of these technical artists and these artists going ahead and just going that extra mile to make something extra juicy, even though maybe that wasn't on their task list. They just went and they had fun with it, and they did something really cute and fun and visually satisfying. Most games don't do that. They usually just go ahead and they do they do it by the numbers, I think. But yeah, maybe I'm selling some people short, but I get bored with the visuals in most games, and Astro's Playroom really my eyes kind of brightened up.
No, you know what? I
saw that video.
I think that last line maybe sells the idea of what you're trying to get across for me. Of you're doing a good job of like putting into words why maybe these things are appealing.
Yeah, I should have led with that maybe.
Like all the little details, because it's easy to lose sight of the forest for the trees, that kind of thing, right? Where I think that's it. You don't look at the details because all the details combined create this like wonderful image that you're just sort of taking in as a whole. And maybe it takes a discerning eye, which you certainly have compared to myself.
There's a level of that as well. There's probably a level of that too.
Yeah, and maybe I just like haven't been able to appreciate these things in these specific ways because I don't know, maybe I've got too much gamer brain where I'm expecting these things to just be spectacular. Yeah,
and I think I suffer from that as well. Like you said, like Red Dead has a lot of these things. A lot of these games have a lot of these things. Yeah. But it's so I don't see a lot of it. But like, and maybe it's because I was younger that they were jumping out more. And these are all older examples I'm giving. But Astrobot, like, it's still there. Like, it's still part of me that I'm looking for these things. And Astrobot was, I don't know, it was another eye opener for me where it like I said, it made my eyes light up again.
I mean, dude, like I thought SSX Tricky was a beautiful game, Like you go down Garibaldi.
It is. And
it's super colorful and vibrant, and like the snow is contrasted so heavily with like the environmental elements around it. Like the UI contrasts against it. The player characters do, but even like the stands, and you go down, you make it towards the finish line, and they're like shooting off this confetti and everything, and it's like colorful as hell on this PS2 game where my cathode ray television like can't even render all of that stuff all that well, and it's still like, wow, this is this explosion of color. Yeah, I don't know.
And back then we're all impressed by just leaving a trail behind us in the snow.
Yeah, totally.
That's kind of where we're at with technology then.
But I think my point there is like maybe losing sight of that because you look at a Red Dead, you're like, I think the snow in this game should look really good. And then you see the snow and you see them walking through the snow and you're like, that looks really good. That's about what I expected. It looks great, I also think it should look great. And maybe that's how the interpretation through our own lenses has maybe changed over time. And I don't know. I lost sight of the Killzone 2 blood looking especially terrific because I was like, these damn Hellgas should bleed. Those motherfuckers, like, kill those space Nazis, So I don't know. Maybe there's something in the way that we consume these things that also has been lost. So we're not quite seeing it the way that you do.
Something tells me I'm going to get a PS5 or something and totally go back to this, like, oh, look at all this. You know, like even 10 years from now, I'll finally get a PS5 and I'll play all these games and I'll have the same reaction. It's just that I have such an old computer, I don't actually get to play a lot of these like kind of groundbreaking games. Elden Ring is a pretty static game, and Resident Evil 4 is kind of a static game as well.
Yeah. I didn't have a good graphics card up until, like, in my life, up until 8 months ago, probably. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever played a game on high settings, like, in my whole life, up until recently. And even then, like Baldur's Gate 3 was my entry into like Ultra.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, that was the best computer I had was the PS3. So it was impressive, like on its own.
Yeah. Same.
And then since then, I've had okay technology in my computer where I've been like, oh, that's cool, whatever.
Yeah. It is nice to have a nice graphics card, though. I'll tell you that. It's pretty sick.
I definitely want to upgrade this computer. I don't know. I mean, when I can afford it, I'll upgrade it. But so far, it's been treating me really nice.
Mm-hmm. We'll get there.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to play the Forever Winter when that comes out.
Yes, we'll kill some scav. We'll scav some stuff together, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll scavenge things.
What do you say, buddy? Is that what you wanted to cover?
Good. That's a wrap.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it's an interesting conversation because I like that you look very intimately at the details of games. I appreciate that about you.
I think I'm going to show you a video of the glass breaking, and you're going to all of a sudden have eyes open.
My world will change.
At all these other games.
Thank you to Resistance.
But then again,
Man.
like I haven't played Red Dead 2. Maybe the glass breaks pretty good in that game, but
the glass breaks pretty good
Fall of Man.
in Last of Us Part 2. I will tell you that. That's the best glass breaking I've ever seen.
That sounds like a pretty good candidate. I might have to look at that. But I'll send you back in 2000 and whatever it was, 9 or 8 or whatever, when Resistance Fall of Man came out. There was amazing glass breaking. I'll find the video for you.
Okay. I will I'll send you a video on The Last of Us 2's glass. We'll compare glass together.
I mean, I've watched a playthrough of that game, so I must have seen it. Maybe I just didn't make a note of it because of those reasons you mentioned, where I was just like expecting it to be good.
Yes. Huh.
And also the sound effect was really good for Resistance 2. It was just such a perfect sound. You just imagine this like heavy paned like 1920s or 1940s or whatever. Like, things were made thicker back then. So like this thick pane of glass breaking, just perfect sound. Anyway, I've talked enough. Let's wrap this thing up.
All right. Cool. Well, this has been Story Players. Thank you folks for listening. Buddy, where can people find you in the world?
Yeah. I am at Acornbringer on most social media platforms. You can find me all, posting about my game development progress there or whatever I end up posting. That'd be Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, all those things. I'm working on a game called Of Love and Eternity. If you want to look that up on itch or Steam, that's available. A demo's available there to play, and you can, wishlist that or do whatever you will with that. So yeah, you can find me around. I'm around online. I'm around.
Sweet. And I am Zachary Snader. You can find me on LinkedIn at that name. You can find my studio, Wildkind, at Wildkind Creations on most places, or just go to wildkind.gg, see what we're up to, hit us up. We're working on a rugby rhythm action game. And yeah.
And potentially a rugby dating.
Potentially. That would be really fun. We'll get there. We'll get there one thing at a time. But yeah, thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time.
It's been very nice. Until next time.